1358, a young merchant's son named Heinrich left Lübeck with a single cartload of Baltic herring, 12 silver marks borrowed from his father's trading partner, and a folded parchment that gave him access to a network of warehouses, credit lines, and trusted contacts stretching from London to Novgorod. He was 22 years old. By the time he was 40, he owned 3 ships, a stone warehouse on the Trave riverfront, and a share in a Bruges contour that generated more income in a single trading season than a skilled craftsman earned in a lifetime. Number 9 on this list is the exact financial instrument Heinrich used to multiply that first 12 marks into a trading empire. Number 4 was so effective at managing risk that European banking took 400 years to reinvent it under a different name. And number 1, the method at the very top of this list, was practiced so quietly and consistently across 2 centuries that historians nearly missed it entirely. These are 20 forgotten side hustles and trading methods that made ordinary Hanseatic merchants Europe's first self-made millionaires, before stock markets, before central banks, and before anyone invented the word entrepreneur. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button, because what these men understood about money, risk, and networks 800 years ago is more practical than anything they teach in business school today. Let us count them down. Number 20, salted herring arbitrage. The entire Hanseatic League was built on a fish. In the late 13th century, enormous schools of Atlantic herring appeared in the shallow waters of the Skagerrak every autumn, and the men who figured out how to salt them, barrel them, and move them quickly to inland markets where protein was scarce became wealthy with a speed that shocked their contemporaries. A barrel of Scanian herring, properly salted and packed in September, could be purchased for around 2 to 3 silver marks at the fishing beaches. The same barrel sold in Frankfurt or Cologne for 5 to 7 marks by midwinter. A merchant who could move 50 barrels through the network in a single season cleared a profit representing several years of income for an ordinary craftsman. The herring trade was not glamorous, but it was the foundational cash flow that funded everything else the Hanseatic League built. Number 19, Lüneburg salt resale along the Baltic coast. If herring was the product, salt was the technology that made it possible, and the men who controlled the movement of Lüneburg salt along the Baltic coast occupied one of the most profitable middleman positions in medieval European commerce. Salt from the Lüneburg saltworks was transported north to Lübeck and distributed east to Stralsund, Danzig, Riga, and Tallinn. A sack of Lüneburg salt purchased at source cost around 1 silver mark. The same sack resold in Riga or Tallinn cost 2 to 3 marks because Baltic cities had no local salt supply and depended entirely on Western imports for food preservation. A merchant with capital to invest in a full cargo of salt could double his money on a single Baltic voyage in 6 to 8 weeks. Number 18, contour network access as a competitive advantage. The Hanseatic contours, the 4 great trading stations in London, Bruges, Bergen, and Novgorod, were not simply warehouses. They were the most sophisticated commercial infrastructure in medieval Europe, and access to them was itself a financial asset of extraordinary value. A Hanseatic merchant arriving in London with his contour membership papers could use the Steelyards warehouses without paying local storage fees, buy goods at negotiated bulk rates unavailable to foreign merchants, and settle disputes through the contour's internal legal system rather than English courts, which were notoriously hostile to foreign traders. Non-member merchants arriving in London paid significantly higher costs at every stage of the same transactions. Hanseatic merchants understood that belonging to the network was itself an income-generating asset, and they protected that membership fiercely. Number 17, the commission agent system. Not every Hanseatic merchant traveled with his goods. The most sophisticated operators of the 14th and 15th centuries stayed home in Lübeck or Hamburg and employed traveling commission agents called factors who moved goods on their behalf for a percentage of the profit. A successful Lübeck merchant with capital could simultaneously employ 3 or 4 factors traveling different routes, each carrying goods and returning with different commodities, multiplying the merchant's effective trading reach without requiring his physical presence on any dangerous sea voyage. The factor earned typically 5 to 8% of the profit on each transaction. The merchant at home earned the remainder while managing multiple operations from his counting house. The men who stayed home and managed networks consistently outperformed the men who traveled. First pattern break. Here is where things get interesting. Because the entries so far have described trading methods, moving goods from one place to another and taking a margin. But the next entries describe something more sophisticated, financial instruments that made money without moving any physical goods at all. The Hanseatic merchants of the 14th century developed financial tools that Europe would not rediscover formally for another 200 years. Number 16. The bill of exchange as a travel substitute. Carrying silver across medieval Europe was dangerous, slow, and expensive. The Hanseatic merchants of the 14th century solved this by developing an informal but highly reliable system of bills of exchange that allowed a merchant in Lubeck to pay a supplier in Bruges without a single silver coin crossing the North Sea. A Lubeck merchant who owed money in Bruges would issue a written order instructing his Bruges representative to pay the specified sum to the named recipient on a specified date. The bill traveled by courier rather than by ship, and the money never moved physically at all. This eliminated the risk of theft, the cost of transport, and the delay of waiting for a ship. Bills of exchange could also be bought and sold at a discount before their payment date, creating a secondary market in paper claims that was the direct ancestor of modern bond trading. Number 15. The Hanseatic letter of credit. A Danzig grain merchant arriving in Bruges for the autumn fair did not need to carry the full purchase price of his intended purchases in silver. He carried instead a letter from his Lubeck partner confirming his creditworthiness and authorizing the Bruges correspondent to extend him up to a specified sum on account. The correspondent was repaid at the end of the trading season from the proceeds of goods sold. This allowed merchants to operate at a scale far beyond their immediate cash holdings, effectively leveraging trusted relationships into expanded purchasing power. The system depended entirely on personal reputation and network trust, which is why Hanseatic merchants invested so heavily in maintaining both. Number 14. Seasonal commodity timing. The most consistently profitable Hanseatic operators were not the boldest risk-takers, but the most disciplined students of seasonal price cycles. Grain purchased in Danzig immediately after the September harvest sold for roughly half the price it commanded in Amsterdam or Hamburg by the following March, when winter stores were running low. A merchant who could purchase and store grain through the winter months earned 50 to 100% returns simply by waiting. The same principle applied to Baltic timber, cheap in summer when logging was active and expensive in winter when construction demand continued, but supply was frozen. Hanseatic merchants maintained careful written records of price cycles across multiple cities and multiple years, and this accumulated price intelligence was treated as proprietary business information. Number 13. Ship share investment. Owning an entire Hanseatic cog was expensive, costing between 100 and 200 silver marks in the early 14th century. The Hanseatic system had developed a practical solution, allowing smaller investors to participate in maritime trade without bearing the full cost of ship ownership. A cog could be divided into shares, typically 8 or 16 equal portions, each owned by a different merchant. The ship's captain managed the vessel for a fee, and the remaining shareholders received their proportional share of cargo profits while bearing proportional losses. This meant that a merchant with 20 marks could own 1/8 of a cog worth 160 marks, participate in Baltic voyages, and earn proportional returns from multiple voyages per year. It was structurally identical to a modern joint stock company, invented by Lubeck merchants 200 years before anyone formally described the concept. Second pattern break. This next one is where the math gets fascinating, because the next entries describe how Hanseatic merchants did not just trade goods or financial instruments, they traded information. And in a world without newspapers, without postal services, and without public price lists, information about what things cost where was so valuable that merchants built entire businesses around controlling it. Number 12. Intelligence networks and price arbitrage. A Hanseatic merchant in Lubeck who knew that pepper prices in Bruges were 20% lower than usual because a Portuguese spice fleet had just arrived, while this news had not yet reached the Baltic, had a brief but extraordinarily profitable window to act before the price information equalized across the network. The Hanseatic system's contours and traveling factors functioned as a commercial intelligence network that allowed price information to flow faster to Hanseatic insiders than to any outsider. Letters between Hanseatic partners were full of commodity price reports, shipping schedules, and political news that affected trade routes. The merchant who read these letters quickly and acted before competitors received the same information consistently outperformed the market. Number 11. The Bruges Cloth Trade Commission. The great Flemish cloth fairs at Bruges attracted buyers from every corner of Europe, and Hanseatic merchants with permanent relationships with Flemish cloth manufacturers could earn commission income by acting as purchasing agents for buyers who lacked direct market access. A German bishop wanting liturgical cloth, a Norwegian monastery needing altar textiles, a Danish nobleman ordering dress fabric, all needed someone with Bruges connections to identify suppliers, negotiate prices, inspect quality, and arrange shipping. A Hanseatic commission agent handling such a transaction typically earned 3 to 5% of the total purchase value. On a large ecclesiastical order worth 200 marks, that commission represented 6 to 10 marks of pure intermediary income earned with a few letters and perhaps a single visit to the cloth hall. Number 10. Bergen dried cod monopoly access. The Bergen contour was the gateway to one of the most valuable commodities in medieval Europe, Norwegian skrei, the Arctic cod dried on wooden racks in the cold Lofoten air, producing a shelf-stable protein source that could be shipped across the continent without spoiling. Hanseatic merchants with Bergen Contour membership had preferential access to Norwegian fishermen at source prices significantly below what the cod sold for in southern European markets, where fish was scarce and expensive. A sack of dried Bergen cod purchased at the Hanseatic price in Norway, sold in Cologne or Frankfurt for 2 to 3 times the purchase price. The Hanseatic League defended this access militarily against Norwegian attempts to bypass the contour system and sell directly to buyers. Number 9. The partnership contract or Gesellschaft. The financial instrument Heinrich used to turn 12 marks into a trading empire was a Gesellschaft, a formal partnership contract allowing 2 or more merchants to pool capital for a specific trading venture, share profits proportionally, and dissolve the partnership at the venture's end without either party bearing unlimited liability for the other's debts. A senior Lübeck merchant with capital but no time to travel could enter a Gesellschaft with a young factor willing to make the voyage, contributing trading capital while the young man contributed his labor. Profits were split on a negotiated formula, typically 60% to the capital provider and 40% to the traveling partner. The contract was specific to a single voyage or trading season and then dissolved, limiting both parties' exposure to exactly the agreed terms. Number 8. The Hanseatic Legal Safe Conduct Trade. The Hanseatic League had negotiated formal safe conduct agreements with dozens of princes, bishops, and city governments along its trading routes, guaranteeing that Hanseatic merchants could travel, trade, and remove their profits without interference. A Lübeck merchant traveling the Rhine under Hanseatic safe conduct paid lower tolls, faced fewer arbitrary inspections, and had legal recourse if his goods were seized. A Dutch merchant making the same journey without Hanseatic affiliation paid every toll and had no recourse if a local lord decided to tax his cargo at an extortionate rate. The differential in effective trading costs between Hanseatic members and non-members on a busy trading route could amount to 10 to 15% of cargo value on a single journey. Third pattern break. Here is where the story becomes personal, because the next entries are not about systems and instruments. They are about specific, practical methods that ordinary Hanseatic merchants used week by week and season by season to compound their advantages into lasting wealth. These are the habits and practices that separated the men who built stone warehouses from the men who rented wooden stalls. Number 7. Warehousing as a profit center. A Hanseatic merchant with a stone warehouse on the Lübeck waterfront did not use it only for his own goods. He rented storage space to smaller merchants, charged handling fees for loading and unloading cargo, and earned interest on short-term loans advanced to merchants waiting for their goods to sell. A well-located warehouse in 14th century Lübeck could generate income from 4 sources simultaneously: storage rental, handling fees, cargo brokerage, and short-term credit. Owning the infrastructure of trade rather than simply participating in trade was the key distinction between the wealthy Hanseatic families and the merely comfortable ones. Number 6. Apprentice training as a business investment. The most successful Hanseatic merchant families took on young apprentices, trained them in the family's trading methods, language skills, and partner network over 3 to 5 years, and dispatched them as trusted factors to manage operations in distant cities. The master merchant gained a trained, loyal representative whose interests were aligned with the family business. The apprentice gained access to a network, a methodology, and a reputation he could not have built independently. The training period was an investment that created a new node in the network, expanding the entire system's reach and generating returns for the master long after the apprentice had become independent. Number 5. Wine and grain price spreads across the Rhine. Rhine wine produced in the Mosel and Rhine valleys was cheap at the source and expensive in the grain surplus regions of the Baltic, where no wine was produced locally. Baltic grain was cheap at the Danzig source and expensive in the densely populated Rhine cities where local agriculture could not feed the urban population. A merchant who could ship wine east and grain west on the same network, effectively swapping the surplus of each region for the deficit of the other, earned the spread on both legs of the journey. The Baltic would never grow wine. The Rhine cities would never grow enough grain. The spread between them was as reliable as the seasons. Number 4. Marine insurance underwriting. The Hanseatic system's method of managing maritime risk was so effective that it took Europe's financial system another 2 centuries to formally reinvent it as marine insurance. A senior merchant with substantial capital would agree, for a fee calculated as a percentage of cargo value, to reimburse a traveling merchant for losses suffered from storm or piracy. The fee, typically 2 to 4% of cargo value on a well-traveled Baltic route, reflected the actuarial reality that most voyages arrived safely, making the underwriter's expected payout much smaller than his expected premium income across a portfolio of covered voyages. A Lubeck merchant who underwrote cargo insurance on 20 Baltic voyages per season, collecting 3% premium while expecting to pay claims on perhaps 1 voyage in 15, earned steady income from pure risk transfer with no need to move any physical goods at all. Number 3. The Novgorod fur trade access. The Peterhof, the Hanseatic contour in Novgorod, gave Hanseatic merchants privileged access to the finest fur-producing region in the medieval world. Russian trappers and merchants brought sable, ermine, beaver, and squirrel furs to Novgorod from territories stretching deep into the Russian interior, and Hanseatic merchants with contour access could purchase these furs at Baltic prices and sell them in the luxury markets of Bruges, London, and Frankfurt at multiples that reflected the enormous appetite of European aristocracy for fine fur. A pack of prime Russian sable pelts purchased in Novgorod for 20 marks sold in Bruges for 60 to 80 marks. The fur trade was the Hanseatic League's highest margin business, and access to it through the Peterhof was one of the most valuable privileges that contour membership conferred. Number 2. The Hanseatic Quality Certification System. One of the least glamorous but most financially significant Hanseatic innovations was the development of standardized quality grades for traded commodities that allowed buyers to purchase goods they had never physically inspected, based solely on the Hanseatic certification mark. A barrel of Scanian herring certified by the Hanseatic grading system could be sold to a buyer in Frankfurt who had never seen the fish and never visited Scania, because the certification mark carried a legal and reputational guarantee that the contents met defined standards. A barrel of equally good herring, packed by a non-Hanseatic Danish merchant, sold at a discount because the buyer had no standardized quality guarantee. The certification premium, typically 5 to 10% above uncertified commodity prices, accrued entirely to the Hanseatic seller. It was income generated not by superior product, but by superior information architecture that reduced buyer uncertainty. Number 1. Network compounding through marriage and family alliance. At the very top of this list sits the method that most perfectly explains how Hanseatic merchant families maintained and grew their wealth across generations. The great Lubeck and Hamburg families married their children strategically into allied merchant families in every major Hanseatic city: Danzig, Riga, Bruges, Bergen, and London. Each marriage created a new trust relationship, a new node in the network through which capital, information, credit, and commercial intelligence could flow without the friction that characterized transactions between strangers. A Lubeck merchant whose sister had married into a Danzig grain family had access to Danzig grain prices, Danzig credit, and Danzig warehouse space on terms no outside merchant could negotiate. Over 2 or 3 generations of strategic marriage, a successful Hanseatic family constructed a personal network spanning the entire geography of Northern European trade, with trusted partners at every critical node. This was not nepotism. It was a deliberate system for converting social capital into financial capital, recognizing that in a world without reliable legal enforcement across borders, the only guarantor of a commercial promise was the reputation of a family whose name both parties valued and whose network both parties needed. These 20 forgotten methods share a single insight that no business school teaches directly, but every successful merchant in history has understood intuitively. Wealth compounds at the intersection of information, trust, and timing. The Hanseatic merchants had better information than their competitors, deeper trust networks than their competitors, and more disciplined timing than their competitors. They did not win by taking more risk. They won by structuring their operations so that risk fell on others while returns accumulated to them. Try one principle from this list this week. Identify the bottleneck in your own field, the information gap, the trust deficit, the timing advantage that your competitors are ignoring. Build the network before you need it. your Hanseatic ancestors built the first modern business empire with these tools. The knowledge is still here. They knew. Now you know too.